Ed said that he went as far as a human could possibly go into that cave. He had to turn it sideways to fit himself through some of those tunnels. Can I get a no? There are all types of theories, and really any of them could be valid. So this is Ben McDaniel. Ben was born on April 15th, 1980 in Memphis, Tennessee. So Ben skipped the whole college route and instead became an entrepreneur at age 18 and started his own construction company. And that actually was pretty successful for him up until 2008 when the economy crashed. And that same year, Ben's younger brother, who he was really close with, died of a stroke at age 22. So that just shook their whole family. The family had a condo in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, and they said that Ben could stay there rent-free as long as he wanted to. So Ben decided to take them up on this offer, and he moved to Florida into the condo by himself, other than his dog, who was named Spooner. And Ben was very attached to his dog Spooner. He absolutely loved her and took her everywhere that he could, except for when he went diving. So long before all this, when Ben was a child, he loved the ocean. And he actually started scuba diving, legitimate scuba diving, when he was pretty young. But now that he was moving back to Florida, he figured that this was the perfect time to finally work towards becoming an instructor. So in the first couple months that he was in Florida, he had already logged 250 dives. In August of 2010, Ben took a trip to go see his parents in Tennessee for his mom's birthday. And while he was there, Ben was telling his family about his next scuba diving adventure. He was going to try to become a master in cave diving. His parents were a little nervous, but also excited for him. They knew that he was an adventurer. Ben was not afraid of anything, according to them. But unfortunately, this is the last time that they would see Ben. So then 2 days later, on August 18th, 2010, Ben woke up bright and early and wanted to get a jump start on diving for the day. He left his house and drove an hour inland to get to an area called Ponce de Leon in Florida. This area is a pretty small town that's really known for its beautiful natural springs. And it also was the home of an underwater cave called the Vortex. Now, Ben actually loved to go to the Vortex. He was known as somewhat of a regular there. Now, this area is super popular for divers because it actually stays at about 68 degrees, and normally water that sits there heats up pretty fast, but this just stayed nice and cool. In fact, people travel from all over the world to come to the Vortex, and it's one of the best places to cave dive and to get experience with cave diving. So once Ben got to the Vortex, he spent some time checking all his equipment, making sure he was all set to go, and then he did a couple exploratory dives where he just dove all the way down there and then went up pretty quickly and logged how deep he had gone and how long it took, etc. Now, according to that log, it seems like Ben went down into the cave several times, went pretty deep into it, and then came back up and logged it each time. He spent the entire day doing this, and then at 7 p.m. he decided that he was going to do his final dive down there for the day. So he got into the water, went down to the cave, went about 300 feet in, and at this point there is a gate and a sign. The sign literally has the Grim Reaper on it. It basically warned divers that you should dive at your own risk in this area, that there is nothing in there worth dying for, and it's incredibly dangerous. And that's why they have a gate down there blocking people from going further. Now, this gate is actually locked to the public most of the time, and you can only get a key to it if you are a certified cave diver. You have to go to the front desk, prove your certification, they give you the key, and you go in, and then you're supposed to lock up on your way out and bring the key back to them. And that's how they keep track and make sure that no one's still in the cave. Apparently back in the 90s, like 13 people died trying to dive in this cave. So that's why they put the sign up, but in this case, Ben was not scared and decided he was going in anyway. So 2 employees who happened to be diving at the same time in the same area noticed Ben go into the cave through the gate and continue to swim into the cave for a deep penetration dive. Now, Ben had actually, according to his logs, had done this dive before and it had gone fine. But unfortunately, this was the last time that Ben would ever be seen. So 2 days later, on August 20th, Friday morning, one of the employees at the springs named Eduardo noticed that Ben's truck was still parked in the exact same place that he had parked on Wednesday morning. He realized that he had never seen Ben get back out of the water, and he was very concerned about the fact that his truck was still sitting in the same place. So he goes in and tells his manager. They called the Holmes County Police Department, and when they got there, they didn't really know what to do because this isn't a normal situation and normal protocol just won't work here. Now, Eduardo was one of the divers that they decided to have go in there and look for Ben, and they were all pretty sure that they we're not gonna find Ben alive, because the caves are very, very high pressured and there's no way that you could survive in there for 2 days with the oxygen supply that he would have had. Meanwhile, back on land, police are searching Ben's truck to see if there's any evidence or clues that they might find in there. Ben's wallet was still in the car and still had over $1,000 of cash sitting inside of it. His cell phone was there as well, and it was pretty clear that Ben was planning to come back to his truck. He also had his dog Spooner at home, who Ben loved, and he wouldn't have just left her for days. So it really seemed to them that Ben was lost somewhere in the cave, was planning to come back out, and never did. So soon after the divers went into the cave, one of the divers came up with 3 decompression tanks. All 3 of the tanks had Ben's name on it, so they knew that they were his tanks. Decompression tanks are used for people that go on deep penetration dives. Because of the depths that they go in, they experience really intense pressure, and when they come back up to the surface, they have to do it really slowly, and they use these tanks to help alleviate the intense nitrogen levels that build up in your body when you're on a deep dive. Now, 2 of the tanks were found outside of the cave, like right outside of it, and one of them was found inside the cave. One was still completely full, one was half full, and one was completely empty. So that kind of tells us that Ben had tried to use them at some point in the dive. But because they were all found in the water still, it leaves most people to believe that he never came out of the water. No sign of Ben. They said they did not see him in there. So police started contacting some of the best divers in the country to come and search the vortex for Ben. And his mom said she could barely even walk when she found out the news. She was just horrified. He was constantly studying about cave diving and the risks of it. And his girlfriend even said that in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, Ben's desk was literally covered with books about cave diving, and he was just obsessed with it. So they were really surprised that something could happen to him. So at this time, investigators are really looking into the vortex and trying to understand what's going on here without having to go down there and dive to see it themselves. They found out about the whole key thing, how he would have had to get the key from the front desk. And this is when they found out that Ben did not get the key because Ben was not cave certified. He was self-taught. He really believed in self-teaching, actually. People who cave dive all the time say it's crucial that you have that certification. So it's very disappointing that Ben did not have it, and it seemed that he was sneaking into the cave. He was somehow able to like shimmy underneath the gate and was getting in there all the time. So Eduardo, like I said, was in the area, and this time, instead of having him go underneath it, I mean, he knew he was gonna sneak in there anyway, he decided that he was just going to open it with his key and just let him in. So now they know he for sure went in the cave. But how are they not able to find his body? There was no other way to get through out anywhere else. Like, you go in and then you turn around and come back out. And since the divers were not finding a body, they were looking for any other signs that Ben was there and possibly may have had a struggle of some sort. There was limestone on the wall, which is pretty easy to scratch. And there were some parts that were just really narrow that they thought they would see some evidence of him having gone through it. They went through this whole cave as much as they possibly could, every last inch of it. Every cave diver that they sent down there would come up saying the same thing, that there's really no way that Ben is in there. Now, there were a few really deep parts of the cave that no one had gone into yet. So that's when this guy named Ed Swanson got involved. Now, Ed is an international underwater cave rescuer. Ed said that he went as far as a human could possibly go into that cave. There were some points where he couldn't even hold his head upright. He had to turn it sideways to fit himself through some of those tunnels. Can I get a no? But despite getting into all those little nooks and crannies, every possible place a human could be, Ed came up absolutely empty-handed. Ben's family felt really hopeless. It seemed like no one else could help, and they were getting extremely frustrated. They just wanted answers. Eventually, they came up with a $10,000 reward for anyone that could go in the cave and find any sign of Ben or figure out what happened. And they actually ended up getting a lot of heat from the diving community. They thought it was super dangerous for them to be offering people $10,000 to risk their lives and go into incredibly deep areas of the cave where, you know, Ed couldn't even get to. It just seemed very unsafe and too risky. So eventually police decided to bring back dogs to the area to see if they could catch Ben's scent anywhere, see if he left the water, and immediately the dog started alerting to the water. So they decided to test a sample of the water to see if there was anything decomposing in it, and they did find bacteria in the water. However, they were not able to confirm if it was from Ben or if it was just from some decaying animal who had fallen into the water. So about a month into the search, police ended up sending a remote control camera down into the cave so that they could watch back on shore and send that into areas that humans just can't get. They were hoping that they could get to the very end of the cave that no one has been able to get to yet and get some footage of it. But eventually it became too narrow and too tight for the camera to continue. So as they start looking into Ben's personal life, they start seeing how troubling his past was and start thinking maybe he was, suffering from depression. Police started thinking that maybe he had gone into the cave knowing he wouldn't make it out, that it was some type of suicide attempt, which just doesn't sit right with me. And like I mentioned, they weren't able to find any trace of scratching on the wall, which you definitely would find in a situation like that. And everyone in Ben's personal life said there was just no way that even though he had been through some hardships, that he was finally in one of the happiest times in his life. It just wouldn't add up for him to, at this point, go and end his life. Also, most divers think that there's just no way that Ben's body is anywhere in that cave. They said that if he was decomposing somewhere, that there would be fish and other creatures attracted to the decomposing smell, and they would be all over that area. But they said it was like a ghost town down there. So as time has gone on, people have of course come up with a bunch of different theories about what could have possibly happened to Ben. Now, one of the most popular theories is that maybe Ben actually planned this whole thing out, that he wanted to leave his current life, stage his death, and then purposely disappear. Others think that it was a staged like the police said, that he wanted everyone to think that he went in the cave and actually went and himself in some other way. But these situations just don't make sense to his family. He was very close with his parents, and they knew they had already been through hell by losing their other son at age 22 to a stroke. He loved his family. He loved his dog too. Like, he wouldn't have just left his dog. But I guess those theories are a possibility. Investigators also really looked into his whole background. They looked at his phone records, his financial records, and there was absolutely no indication of any type of planning for him to leave the country or to stage anything like this. And then there's the possibility that Ben's body is still in that cave somewhere, that he's just in a really small crevice or somewhere where people have not been able to get to. Most divers say this is very, very, very unlikely, but I guess it's an actual phenomenon that sometimes divers, if they panic, like if something gets in their mask, sometimes they can panic so much and become disoriented. And sometimes in that panic, people can wedge themselves into a tiny, tiny space that you normally wouldn't think a person could fit. As time went on, the diving community online was pretty brutal towards Ben and his family. It became very well known and very controversial, and a lot of different divers wanted to prove their theory was right. And then in February of 2011, 6 months after Ben had disappeared, Ben's family was contacted by this woman. Her name is Jill Heinerth. She's an Australian, and she is known as one of the best cave divers in the entire world. Jill and her husband had seen all of the terrible things being said about Ben online and all of the arguments that people were having over what could have happened, and decided that she wanted to go down there and figure out what happened herself. And they actually filmed something called Ben's Vortex. It's a documentary, and they took cameras down there in an effort to show Ben's parents that he wasn't in there, to show them the very ends of the cave. Now, Jill and her husband, like everyone else, did not find Ben in the cave. However, they found something that no other diver had found, and it was Ben's shovel, and it was at the very end of the cave. However, law enforcement looked more into the shovel, and they determined that it actually belonged to one of the people who had originally mapped out the cave, so they don't even know if Ben had made it that far in. In March 2012, the reward increased to $30,000, and right after this, a man named Larry Higginbotham actually went in the cave, and he died in there. But unlike Ben's, his body was recovered. Now, a lot of people think that, even though it hasn't been confirmed, that Larry was down there looking for Ben, or possibly trying to get that reward. So after getting a lot of backlash about it, they ended up canceling that reward offer, which I think was a good decision. Now, obviously, this wouldn't be a true crime case without a theory about possible foul play. And there's actually some interesting information here. So the night that Ben was at Vortex Springs, the owner was was also there. His name is Lowell Kelly, and he's known for being kind of a sketchy guy. Allegedly, he had taken one of their employees who confronted him about him not paying him, and he said he owed him thousands of dollars, and he took this guy. The man escaped, luckily. Later, Lowell Kelly was charged with and some people think that maybe they got into an altercation, that Ben was confronted about going into the tunnel under the gate or getting in there when he wasn't supposed to. So maybe Ben really did emerge out of the water, and then Lowell him as soon as he got out. Somehow he got rid of his body. 2 days later, they find his car and the whole thing starts. Another theory is that Ben's body was found by some of the employees, that maybe Lowell had ordered them to get rid of him, that maybe they didn't want it to look bad on Vortex that a guy had gone through the gate and had died on their property, and they didn't want to create any more problems. And by the time the police found out and got involved, it was all too late to come forward about what really happened. And this could be a possibility. Again, this is all theories, pure speculation. No one has any idea what happened to Ben McDaniel that day. So Ben is still missing to this day, and it's really, really hard for his family. They have absolutely no answers. His parents said it's just ruined their lives, really. They've started a grief counseling group for other parents who've lost their kids in an undetermined way. They still have Ben's dog, Spooner, living with them, and they love her. It's kind of like a memory of him in a way, but they would love to know what truly happened. And so would everyone else. I was literally up last night thinking about it before filming this, until late hours, thinking about how scary it would be to be stuck in a narrow cave and not be able to get out. But just the fact that they didn't find his body in there, I mean, it makes no sense. How? This wasn't a typical cave with really small areas that you could wedge a person's body into. It had small tunnels, but it didn't have like crevices like that. Just listening to the way divers explain it, there's just no way his body's in there, dude. But that's it for me today, guys. Stay safe out there. I will see you guys next time.